Hello, my name is Antonio,
And my name is Brady.
and we are with PTV featuring a current events segment on Afghanistan.
On Thursday, August 26th, a massive explosion occurred at the Kabul airport. Antonio and I met with history teacher Mr. Cotter that same day. Cotter is an Army veteran and served in Afghanistan before becoming a teacher.
According to U.S. officials, a few U.S. personnel were reportedly wounded in the explosion.
At least 30 individuals were taken to a nearby emergency room.
Sources say that the explosion was fueled by a breach in security, but there is a speculation that it was the Taliban.
For a little background on what's happening overseas, let's look at your interview with Mr. Cotter.
So, what are your thoughts on the Taliban taking over Afghanistan again?
It's I'm conflicted. As a former soldier who went over there, it's really disheartening to see the Afghan National Army just evaporate and like take their uniforms off and disappear. I think there's a couple of reasons for that. I think a lot of them view the ascendancy of the Taliban as inevitable. So why fight against something that they view as inevitable? I think there's an element of like cultural patriarchy in there as well. The Taliban is a pretty regressive, very hyper-conservative Islamist emirate, and they intend to have a strict interpretation of Sharia law, meaning those men who would have fought against them are going to be existing in a system that prioritizes them. So I think that's certainly part of it. After $80 billion worth of training and support, though, it's really disheartening to see them just put their weapons down. All of the progress, specifically for women and girls in Afghanistan, is at risk right now. American credibility is at risk. I don't think anyone would make the argument that we should have stayed forever or indefinitely, but we're judged not only on how we fight wars, but how we end them. And the fumbled withdrawal has created a humanitarian crisis. As a historian, it's slightly different. Afghanistan has always been where empires go to die. Like Alexander the Great couldn't conquer it. The Soviet Union, the British, at the height of the British Empire, nobody was able to conquer Afghanistan. So a lot of that is because we look at it through a Western lens. Afghanistan doesn't really have a sense of itself as a cohesive state, and trying to look at it as a cohesive state is a mistake. Afghans are more connected through like regional and tribal connections and like a really complex tribute system. All of that contributes to why creating a Western-style democracy in Afghanistan was kind of a fool's errand.
So, do you think the U.S. will step in again?
I think we've stepped in now. There's a couple thousand U.S. troops on the airfield in Bagram, not in Bagram, in Kabul. The president has set a somewhat arbitrary withdrawal date of next Tuesday, and whether or not they can evacuate that many people remains to be seen. Although the military is doing a pretty good job right now, like thousands and thousands of people are leaving. It turns out when you let the military be in charge of moving a bunch of people, they do a good job. The problem with the mission in Afghanistan is there was not really an articulable, like coherent mission for a really long time, with the State Department having some goals, the DoD having others, and NGOs having others. So if we do engage, it's going to require a really like specific, coherent mission, and I'm not sure that's going to happen.
So, do you think the U.S. should intervene again?
I think any intervention needs to be really limited in scope, in protecting like Americans and American assets and interests. Also, I think we shouldn't limit it just to Afghans who helped us. Any Afghan who wants to get out of Afghanistan should be allowed to get out of Afghanistan. I think we have a moral and ethical obligation to take in any Afghan that wants to leave. The Taliban is regressive. Last time they were in charge in the 1990s, if a woman wanted to learn how to read, they'd light her on fire. Homosexuals are thrown off the top of buildings, and girls are stoned to death if they're raped because technically they've had premarital sex. We have an obligation to take those people in.
So, overall, who do you believe is at fault?
I think it would be a mistake to like say empirically like this group is at fault. It's not really a binary. It's more a collection of successes and failures that got us to this point. So like every president since George W. Bush through Joe Biden now has been responsible for the mission, but the original mission was eradicate the Taliban, eradicate Al-Qaeda, and keep Afghanistan from being a launching pad for terrorist organizations. And a good argument could be made that that mission was a success right up until 10 days ago. So certainly American leadership bears some responsibility, but mostly for the failed withdrawal. The Afghan Army, right, they own the fact that they took their uniforms off and walked away. The president of Afghanistan, fled almost immediately. Some reports saying he left with over $150 million in cash. So rampant cronyism and corruption in the Afghan government. But more than anything else, the Taliban. I think, especially as Westerners, we're looking at what's happening. We're saying, how did we facilitate this? And we certainly didn't do everything correctly. However, I don't want us to lose sight of the fact that the reason why there's a humanitarian crisis is because the Taliban is going door to door to find people who supported the Westerners, and they're killing people. So the real bad guy here is the Taliban. The question is, how do we move forward?
Thank you, Mr. Cotter.
Did I mention it?